I'm very, very concerned that in the last, pick a number, 4, 5, 6 years, that the onset of technology in the talent acquisition process is now so pervasive that by way of online applications, online assessments, online introductions, especially in the COVID environment, online everything, that it's actually, I fear, become way too easy for hiring managers to basically go, well, what do I need this for? Because we have a computer-generated assessment of Brandon, and they filled out the questionnaire, and look, here's what it came back. It said that...
By the way, people listening, he picked up his book. Like, why do we need these 4 questions? We can just the computer will just spit out.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the Workplace Therapist Show. Of course, I'm your host, Brandon Smith, and the entire purpose of this show is one singular thing, and that is to help you have better conversations at work and healthier relationships at work. So since we are talking about work, and we're talking about the relationships that happen at work, I think we need to start with the very first relationship we encounter at work, and that is the interview relationship. And so this is often a very stressful time for both the interviewer, interviewee, and it's a challenging time that can either set us up for success or potentially sour us right out of the gate. And so I'm really excited to have us discuss a cure for that first conversation with my good friend and guest I've had on before, Allan DeNiro. Allan, really good to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, and so to spotlight this, you've got a brand new book out.
Yes.
And I think the title says it all. The only 4 interview questions you'll ever need to find the right people every time.
Yep.
That's fantastic.
Well, it's bold, I'll say that. Because it really gets to, wait a minute, so you're going to tell us there's only 4 questions out of thousands or hundreds of them, and to find the right people every time. But look, I believe in it, and I believe in it because it's something I've practiced for decades, literally, and tracked the results of. And really, lastly, or as importantly, I'm very passionate about what you described. The interview process is the first chance that we have to meet and learn about each other, and I could go on to companies who don't realize it's really a marketing opportunity. Think about that for a minute, that that candidate is going to leave, and whether they're hired or not, they're going to come away with an impression of you and your brand and your company.
Yeah.
And people say, wait a minute, so if I don't hire them, they could still have a positive impression of my brand? And my assertion would be yes, they can. Yeah. So you teed it up perfectly. To me, it's a critical, vital first step.
Yeah, and if we take the relationship analogy, it's not only a first step, it's a first date.
Absolutely.
And so it's really, how do we set that up for success? And success really is, so, we're putting our best foot forward, they're putting their best foot forward, and we're deciding, do we want to continue to walk with each other, or do we want to go separate ways? But We're doing it in a way that's healthy for all parties involved.
Yeah. And again, Brandon, you made a great point. I found over the years that a lot of hiring managers and companies, the interview and the talent acquisition process in their mind is somehow disconnected or separate from what might be a future and hopefully long-term relationship. And what I mean by that is that a lot of hiring managers don't necessarily associate, okay, so the time that we spend together and get to know each other, and if the decision is made to have you join our team, then whatever my criteria were, whatever my logic was, whatever my reasons were that I hired you, would I not immediately, day one in a relationship, want to start reinforcing those things?
Yeah.
I've said to many managers, first day on the job, so now I'm past the interview part. Have you ever said to a brand new person, new relationship in our organization, let me tell you why I hired you? let me tell you why you're here. And they're like, why would I do that?
Yeah.
And you know, again, maybe it's for me, it's just sort of too basic. But if I'm brand new to an organization and I want a relationship, maybe I'd like to hear that, look, of all the people I talk to, I chose you for this reason. And on the first day on the job, it's like, wow. And by the way, now I know what to expect or begin to expect.
So powerful. And one of the, it reminds me, one of the things that the folks over here in the studio have heard me say many, many times, but I still seem to find myself preaching it on a daily basis, is in absence of communication, people almost always assume the worst.
Yes.
So if you don't tell me why, I'm not going to say, well, it's because of my wonderful charm.
That's right.
I'm going to say, because they couldn't find anybody else. You know, they were desperate.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. They just need to put a warm body in here for a couple months, and they're going to eventually replace me with somebody better one day.
Right.
So that's a really great conversation. It sounds so commonsensical, but how powerful is that to say to somebody, this is why I hired you. This is why I chose you.
Right.
I mean, it's reaffirming, it sets the relationship up well, and it adds a level of clarity.
Yeah.
It's just a beautiful start.
No, it's an excellent point because, again, you're right. In the absence of that, your point is well made, I think, in particular in an environment where, look, the job search process, the talent acquisition process today, if I'm a candidate looking, I can go online, I can punch in 2 or 3 keywords for a position, and hundreds of jobs will open up, right? At least on my screen, and we do what human beings do. You know, I'll scan 20 or 30 of them. No. Oh, that one's interesting. No. Oh, that one's interesting. So it's really a two-way form of communication. What did you do in our conversation that compelled me so much to want to hire you?
Yeah. Which
gets to, I have to set up an interview in order to gain that knowledge, but it's also two-way. Look, I'll tell you, one of the 4 questions gets to that issue of, look, in a world of 20, 30, 40 possible things as a candidate that could have got your attention, why did you pick ours?
Yeah.
What is it that got your attention about the position we have? I want to know that. I want to understand that. So your points are very well made on that.
So I want to jump in here in a second into the questions, but before we do that, I realize I haven't really given you the background credentialing than I should have. Because people are listening to this guy talk and they're like, who is this guy?
Who is this crazy guy?
Trust me, this guy has got a lot to share. So your current role is you're the founding principal of New Century Partners, Inc. So tell me a little bit about what New Century Partners does.
So essentially, we provide advice and counsel to C-level executives and company owners, and the answer is okay, fine. So about what? And the short answer is whatever is on their plate. Meaning, I've been on both sides of the desk, and as a CEO, as an owner, et cetera, I've learned that every owner, C-level executive goes to bed at night with something on their plate, on their mind, that when they wake up the next morning, it's still there. And they kind of wish it wasn't still there. And so what we have found is that the value of that person having a confidant, someone that they can speak to. And the other quick niche, I think, that's a little bit different maybe about us is that our work is essentially all completely confidential. And what that means is we have no need to take credit for anything that's a project or anything that we work on. And so it's been interesting. Some customers said, well, wait a minute, you don't want to put us on a client list, or, we don't want to take credit for it. Like, look, if we can work together and you can hit a home run on whatever it is you need, God bless you, Godspeed. So anyways, C-level execs, company owners, whatever is on their plate, and that may not sound very focused, but it's what we found is there's always something that they just would like another set of eyes on.
And what makes your background so unique, and we don't have to go into all the detail of it. I know you probably don't want to spend a lot of time talking about yourself, but I want to make sure I'm talking about you.
Yep.
Is you in addition to having worn kind of the senior HR hat in multiple organizations,
right?
You're not just HR. You've grown up in multiple parts of business and run multiple parts of the business. So you understand the business, but you've also spent a considerable portion of your career helping to guide the people side of businesses.
Right.
So when we're talking about processes and systems and what works and what doesn't, and how it contributes to business from a people side, you've got years and years of experience thinking about that and working through this stuff.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. I've been very fortunate in that I've had the opportunity in my career to be in sales, marketing, manufacturing, distribution, strategic planning, mergers and acquisitions, on and on, and HR or people. One of the things I think that did for me, and the people that were gracious enough to help me do all those things, were that I learned that the people side of the business, for some reason, over many years, in people's minds, got disconnected. Like, sales and marketing and the revenue stuff and the exciting stuff is over here, and the people, we don't. I used to say that in the old days, if you found the HR department, it was downstairs under the steam pipes in the corner, And many executives in the company said, I don't really know what they do down there, but or like the school nurse, like I only need them when I need them, and I don't want to see them in between. My point is, I really believe, because of other things that I experience, that's not a separate function. I mean, it's a cliche, but it's really not. Your people define everything.
Yeah.
Your brand, your company, your market presence, your prowess. So, at any rate, I've been very fortunate to have touched different bases.
So now let's dive into the book.
Yep.
Right. And I want to ask this question because I think it's an important one. What prompted you to ultimately sit down and say, I want to kind of bring this to life and give this to the world?
Yep. Some of what I've already talked to. I realized many, many, many years ago how broken the interview and talent acquisition process was, and really both from the candidate standpoint and the hiring manager standpoint. In the book, I use an analogy of, so you're a candidate. You get an invitation to a party, and you know the date of the party, and you know where you're supposed to show up. You're not really sure who's going to be there. You're not really sure what the topic is. You're not sure how I'm supposed to dress. You're not sure the other people that you might meet at this. And so I talk in the book about, if that were a social setting, forget business and forget hiring and interview, how comfortable would you feel? Like, hey, Brandon, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to a party. Really?
I can tell you who wouldn't be going.
Yeah, who's going to be there? I don't know. What are they going to talk about? I'm not sure. How are you supposed to dress? I don't know. What is it that they really want to have you at this party? I don't know. So it just occurred to me, this is too critical and important a piece to be so dysfunctional. And then the other part is, with that in mind, many decades ago, I sort of lighted on 4 questions that I kept asking people. And believe it or not, the first revelation to me was, with the 4 questions, was how comfortable and engaged the candidates were. The number of candidates who would say to me afterward, that was like, I really enjoyed that. That was really like, I'm really glad I talked to you. And by the way, this is before any decision about, you're going to hire you or not.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, think about how profound that is. You have a candidate, again, this mythical social setting I talked about. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know who's going to be there. I don't know what they want, et cetera. And the person comes away from that an hour later or 45 minutes later going, wow, that's like the best interview I've ever had. So It was experience that led me down the path, and then ultimately it's something I really believe in. Maybe you can tell I'm a little bit passionate about it.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got some time before we go and roll in a break. I got to hear the first question. So I don't know if there's an order to these, but I would love to hear at least.
Yeah. I joke I can't tell you the questions because then you don't have to buy the book. But anyways, so the first question is by design. It's a very encompassing one. And again, there's some preamble and some lead up to this that sort of gets you to that point. But ultimately, and by the way, we may talk in a minute about, for me, the complete, total uselessness of a resume during the actual interview process. Yeah. So for me, a resume is simply, I've got a position, I've got hundreds of responses online, whatever. To me, it's just very quickly two piles. I want to talk to this person. I don't want to talk to this person, et cetera, et cetera. So the point is that the first question with some preamble basically comes down to, look, Brandon, I've seen your resume. It's very impressive. I really appreciate it. We're not going to talk about your resume right now because you know what's on it and I know what's on it. And resumes are about things, not people. And so the question I have for you is this. Before we finish our time today, what is the single most important thing about you that you want me to know about? And by the way, maybe it's on your resume, maybe it's not on your resume. I don't mean this the way it sounds, but I don't really care if it's on your resume. What's the single most important thing you want me to know about you before you leave? And I explain, one of the things I talk about in the book is, if you're going to ask a question, it's a courtesy to the candidate. Explain why you're asking it.
Yeah.
Because first of all, they go, wow, nobody ever asked me that before. And my explanation quickly to them is, after I ask the question, is, let me just tell you where I'm headed. I talk to friends, relatives, neighbors all the time who say they had an interview, and I say, hey, how did it go? The most common response I've gotten for years is, I never really got a chance to tell my story.
Oh, interesting.
They never really asked me the right question. And so I say, look, Brandon, when you get in your car, I want you to be able to say the one thing I wanted that guy to know, he knows. And so I say, I'm going to turn control completely over to you, and I'm here to listen. So
that's beautiful.
It's not quite as long, but you get it.
Okay, so here's what we're going to roll into break because it's time. And when we come back from break, I would love to hear maybe an example of some time in your career when you asked that question.
Yep.
And a response that maybe either surprised you or even surprised the candidate when they thought about it. And maybe both of you were, a little bit taken aback, but it ended up yielding something that wouldn't have come from the traditional process, quote unquote.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Got it.
All right. It's good. I feel like I'm being interviewed. All right. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to the show. In case you haven't heard, Brandon's got a new book out. He's going to tell you all about it.
Thanks, Emily. So the book is The Hot Sauce Principle, How to Live and Lead in a World Where Everything is Urgent All the Time. And if you're like me, and like most of us, everything does feel urgent all the time. It's like hot sauce is being poured on everything, whether it's our work life, our family life, coming from our clients, coming from our boss. And so the book is a practical guide on how do we manage urgency. Not only how do we set proper boundaries, but how do we properly create urgency when we need to. So I wrote the book for you. I can't wait for you to get a copy.
Thanks, Brandon. Don't forget to check out The Hot Sauce Principle, available now on Amazon.com. Back to the show.
Okay, welcome back from break. Of course, this is the Workplace Therapist Show, and I'm your host, Brandon Smith. Right before the break, Allan DeNiro, my good friend and guest here, was talking about his new book, The Only 4 Interview Questions That You Need to Ask. And he shared the first one, which I think was a really powerful one. And that was, I love the way you said it. Like, when we're done here today, I'm paraphrasing, we're done here today, what's the one thing you want to make sure that I know?
Right.
The one thing that you want to make sure that you leave here feeling good, that you communicate to me, may or may not be on your resume. What's that one thing you really want me to know? So I kind of gave you this challenge right before break on maybe thinking of a time in your career when you asked that question and the response either surprised you or surprised the candidate.
Yep.
Can anything come to mind for you?
Well, I think, yes, specifically and generally, because it has come up a lot. One of the things that I find is candidates are very surprised with that question. And like all human beings, when we're surprised, we may tend to run to what we're comfortable to. And so sometimes the response is, well, on my resume, it says, and I'm like, time out. I said, I saw your resume. I appreciate your resume. So my point is, candidates, I think, are taken aback. And I have to, I'm very big in my process in the book of making the candidate comfortable. The more comfortable you are, the more I'm going to learn about you. And it's not a game. I really want to know you. Yeah. So part of it is candidates who've either said, wow, nobody ever asked me that question before, or wow, I never thought about it. And so it may take a little bit of a pivot. Let's take a minute. Let's think about that a little bit. In terms of the most surprising, that's a hard one because remember, my premise, and it's not a game, is I want to learn the single most important thing about you. And so I've heard everything from, interviewing for a very technical software kind of a person or position who said, well, the most important thing about me is that, I'm a skydiver and a mushroom farmer. It's like, okay, tell me more about that. Why is that the most important thing? So it's interesting because the 4 questions in some cases may not sound that profound, but remember the goal, your comfort, our communication, the building of a relationship, and I need to understand why and how you could really be a great addition to our team. So,
yeah. Well, I think there's something you did in there that's real subtle that I want to make sure everyone listening or watching doesn't lose. And that is, once they gave a response, you didn't then say, thank you, let's go on to question 2.
Oh, absolutely.
You didn't do that.
No, absolutely not.
It became an opportunity to get more curious,
right,
and to truly learn and understand.
Yep.
So it's really not the first question. These questions are only setting up a discussion and dialogue.
Absolutely.
So you're saying, that's interesting, tell me more about that. And so you're going into a deeper, to really uncover more about the person.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that every one of these, some level of curiosity should follow whatever response they give you.
There's a phrase I use in the book more than once, and it is for the hiring manager, I want you to become a student of human nature. And in essence, what that means is the more that I use this technique, the more candidates I meet, the more I listen, the more I learn, the more stories I hear, I will become a student of human nature. I will begin to understand what makes people tick and how they think and what's important to them and what's not important. Again, I hope that doesn't sound like some game or some psychological. I sincerely want you to become a student of human nature because that's what your specialty, that's what relationships are about. If we understand that, we're 90% there.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. So I really want people to buy the book. So I don't want us to go through all 4 questions today.
Right.
But I would like to get one more.
Yep.
So if you'd be willing to give us the gift of one more question.
Okay.
I'll let you pick which of the remaining 3 you'd like to hit us with.
I appreciate that. I'll actually jump to number 4 out of the 4.
Okay.
And it's one that is, for many candidates, completely unexpected, but again, not a game. So the 4th question comes down to this. Look, Brandon, I appreciate the time we've spent today, and you've really shared a lot of information with me, and that's helpful. There's one more thing that I would like to know, and it's this. What do you do for fun? And just so you know, why would I ask such a question? Think about our free time. It's the one place that you have 100% discretion of how to spend that free time, that fun time. Now, look, in a busy world, that might be 15 minutes, or it might be 3 hours, or it might be a weekend. But tell me about what you do for fun. And again, people are like, wow, no one ever asked me that before. But when I hear and understand, when you have 100% decision-making control over how you're going to spend your discretionary time, and then based on that, you decide to do X, Y, Z, that tells me volumes about, and I'll give you kind of a silly example, but you asked earlier, I've heard everything from, I skydive, I sing in the opera, and I've heard people say, I don't really like being around people very much, and so my free time and my fun time is I love to sit in my house with my 13 cats and read books. Okay, is that bad? Not necessarily, although the cat's part's a little weird for me, but that tells me that if I'm running an organization that runs on interactivity, runs on dynamics, it's a bunch of type A personalities who always want to be together. And your number one goal in your discretionary time is to be alone and not be around people. It's not a criticism. It's a piece of information that tells me how well will this person possibly fit in the culture that we're trying to create. So. Yeah. People don't expect, well, what do I do for fun? Because that's not on your resume, usually.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so you end with that one.
Yes, yeah.
Interesting. So it's all, in many ways, we could look at these questions and say, you could extrapolate on the concepts of it and say, you could have a better date night with your spouse if you ask questions related to some of this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really about trying to get underneath what really matters to another person.
It's an interesting point. In the COVID era, we started in our neighborhood. We live at the bottom of a hill on a cul-de-sac, and so the neighbors that are within range, a couple, 4 or 5 times ago, we said, hey, bring a lawn chair, come down, we'll sit and socially distant, we'll be outside, and we'll just sit and talk so we see each other. And my nature with this is so ingrained that by nature, I ask questions, and so without planning it, the neighbors are there, and I'd say, oh, John, Mary, Sue, tell me what's going on. What's going on with your life? How are the kids? And after about the second or third time, one of the new neighbors said, "You really ask a lot of questions, don't you?" But she was actually appreciative of it, and it was. I think she said something like, "You really try very hard to not make it about you. You're really interested in what we're up to and how we're feeling." So it is something I believe in. I think it's at the core of human relations, whether it's a job interview, whether it's organizationally. The more we can understand each other, the more likely in a hiring talent acquisition situation, we can decide if it's a good fit. And I say in the book, the purpose of this is everybody doesn't get a trophy. I get that.
Yeah.
But everybody deserves a chance to tell their story. And the number of times people leave interviews, and again, how did the interview go? I never really got a chance to tell my story. They never really asked me the right question. That's a shame. That's a loss for you, the candidate, and frankly, it's a terrible loss for me as the hiring manager.
I agree. I think that's such a great way to say it. That's definitely another mic drop moment. That's absolutely. So we have a little bit of time left,
yep.
and rather than jump into the remaining 2 questions, because I want folks to buy your book, I want to ask a different kind of question.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you my magic wand, okay, and you can wave the magic wand, and you can fix anything with that magic wand. What else would you fix in the talent acquisition process if you could wave that magic wand and say, no more. We're not going to do it this way ever again. Yep. Wave it. It's going to fix this thing. And then it's going to make that whole beginning of those relationships at work off to a much better start.
Yep. Well, you know me, and so you know my answers are sometimes not conventional. I'm very, very concerned that in the last, pick a number, 4, 5, 6 years, that the onset of technology in the talent acquisition process is now so pervasive that by way of online applications, online assessments, online introductions, especially in the COVID environment, online everything, that it's actually, I fear, become way too easy for hiring managers to basically go, well, what do I need this for? Because we have a computer-generated assessment of Brandon, and they filled out the questionnaire, and look, here's what it came back. It said that...
By the way, people listening, he picked up his book. Like, why do we need these 4 questions? We can just the computer will just spit out.
Yeah, exactly. So what I would fix is trying as hard as I can, because I don't want to be an old guy about technology. I get it. I love it. It has a lot of benefits. But I'm concerned that it has now made it a very antiseptic and quote unquote easy process to say, I don't need to really get involved because I've got the data, I've got the science. So I would force, quote unquote, that there comes a time we have to talk. And so use the tools, but learn to talk, learn to be a student of human nature.
I think that is so true. I'm going to use another analogy just because it came to mind for me. Hopefully this resonates with some people listening. I'm a big baseball nut. I love baseball. And one of the things that makes baseball an interesting sport, I think, is they're always trying to create new metrics to figure out a player's performance. Like they take a couple metrics, combine them, come up with a new one. Now it's exit velocity, how hard the ball comes off a person's bat, and they're trying to figure out. And then what they do is they put all that into a thing, and they say, well, this person's worth this much. But they forget to see how do they play as a team member. What's their clubhouse vibe?
Absolutely.
Is it all about them? How about in the clutch? Do they perform when there's it's the 9th inning and there's 2 outs and there's runners on base and they're down by a run?
Absolutely.
Or do they crumble? What happens in those situations? But the numbers don't tell that story. They don't really tell the character of the person. They just tell those particular numbers based on that particular event or series of things that were set up for that person. Just like any kind of assessment is flawed because it's based on the questions that are asked.
Yep.
So it's and so there's this school of thought even in baseball. It's like, do you go all the way in the metrics, or is it the old school scouts that are doing it based on their eye? And the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. But it's your point is saying, let's don't go so far down to the metrics where we're losing out on the character stuff.
Right.
That any, no matter how good AI will ever get, they're probably never going to get to a place where they can evaluate someone's character. Absolutely.
And here's why your story is so pertinent. When in a hiring talent acquisition process, when things don't work out, right? Candidate and company, organization, part company, we always have amazingly 20/20 vision about why it didn't work. Oh, well, we have a fast-paced culture here, and she or he just couldn't keep up. Oh, we're really into technology, and they don't really get technology. Or, we're into customers and taking care of customers, and they don't appreciate customers. It's amazing that we have 20/20 hindsight when it's too late. When it's and look, I don't like train wrecks, and train wrecks are bad for candidates and employees. They're bad for companies. So your analogy, your story is a great one. If we can move that 20/20 vision as close as we can to the front, not to the back, then I just think it's a much better outcome for everybody.
Yeah, and I love that your questions kind of help us to do that, make it part of that process. So we're not ignoring some of the other things that are measurable, but we're complementing it.
Right.
Because to your point, all the examples you gave on why it didn't work out, it's always that blanket, it was not a culture fit.
Yeah.
Right? Which is another way of saying, for whatever reason, this person's character didn't fit with the team character or the company character or the company, however we need to operate either together as a group or in the way in which we serve our customers.
Yep.
There wasn't a fit there. Well, how can we figure that out earlier?
Right.
Yeah.
A very, very, very high percentage of failures at any level are not because the person did not have the technical skills or what says their resume says they had. Okay, the failure rate is much more about the people part and the relationship part. So very, very few people fail because they're supposed to be a software engineer and they're not a software engineer, or they're supposed to be a doctor and they're not a doctor. It's not why they fail. They fail because of relationships and things that we should have seen coming. And you can't, I'm not Cinderella, you can't get every single one of them, but boy, we could do a lot better than we've been doing in some cases. Some companies are very good at it.
Also another good soundbite. We'll have to just take that, put that on social media. That's really, really good. Okay, so I ask all these questions. It's a question at the very end of my time with a guest. So if you were to think of kind of a life hack on how we can have better conversations, either at work or at home, what might that be? What's a little tip or trick we might have that would make us have better conversations at work or at home?
The short answer would be speak less and listen more. Mm-hmm. and by the way, set yourself up to speak less and listen more. I will tell you that one of the downsides to this approach is candidates have not experienced it a lot. And so when you say to them, I'm turning control over to you, I want to listen to you, a lot of times they're like, really? And they're not ready for that. So speak less, listen more, and become a student of human nature, meaning do not immediately judge before you listen. And the more you listen, the more candidates you meet, the more you will learn, and you'll be able to sort of begin to catalog things a little bit. Yeah, amen, brother. Beautiful. Well, if people want to get a copy of this book or learn more about you and what you're up to, where could they go? So a couple things. The book is available in both print and ebook form. The ebook is on Amazon, and if you put the title in, the full title, you'll get the e-version. As far as the print version, the couple of ways, our website is newcenturypartners.com. If you scroll to the bottom of the page, the homepage, you'll see the book and all the ordering information. I try to keep things simple. Look, just send me an email. ad@newcenturypartners.com, and I'll do the work for you. I'll help you out. So it's really an engagement tool and a vehicle more than it is, I hope, more than it is just another book that's out there. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. This was fantastic. I feel like it was a great interview. I don't know if I got the job though. I mean, well, I'll let me know later. Yeah, that's right. There you go. That's right. But at least it was a good experience. I did. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Allan. You're an absolute gift, and thank you for listening and watching the show. Of course, if you are listening, please rate and review the show. That's how we grow our followers and grow our tribe, so more of us can create healthier and healthier work environments. If you want more additional resources, of course, you can go to my site, theworkplacetherapist.com, for prior shows, blog posts, free resources to make you even more effective at work. And if you haven't got a new copy or purchased a new copy of my book, The Hot Sauce Principle, How to Live and Lead in a World Where Everything is Urgent All the Time, why not? What are you waiting for? You should go get a copy. You can get on Amazon. You can go to workplacetherapist.com and purchase a personalized copy for me if you'd like. So until our next show, have a great week and an awesome life.